Welcome to Penn Jen's Inkwell podcast. My name is Jen Waters. I hope you enjoy my stories. Minuet is my Cinderella-like fairy tale with helpers other than a traditional fairy godmother. In my story, the magic helpers are silkworms, which spin dresses bringing true love. Many renditions of Cinderella have appeared throughout the years. Yashin, the heroine of the Chinese Cinderella story, doesn't have a fairy godmother. Instead, she has a magical fish as a helper. In Ash Girl, the Grimm brothers' rendition, when the mother dies, for instance, the father forgets his dead wife almost immediately, whereas the daughter loyally goes to the mother's grave 3 times a day and cries. While at the grave, she plants a tree, which could be interpreted as a cross. The tree becomes the source of her magical help when it is visited by a white dove. In some ways, as Mr. Fred Rogers would say, look for the helpers. In my story, the magic silkworms are the helpers that were worth looking for. In my mind, I imagined that a story like Minuet would have to take place somewhere like a quaint cottage village of the Cotswolds in the United Kingdom. I visited there while studying abroad in college and loved the thatched roof homes. I could see any one of the homes in the Cotswolds having a wooden spinning wheel. Although I've never sewn a dress myself, I do love fashion and would love to have a line of dresses one day. Up until now, the only thing I've ever sewn includes a blue monkey pillow in middle school, cross stitches in high school, and the occasional button that falls off a jacket or shirt. My mom loves to sew, however, and once even made a quilt for her bed. When I was growing up, I remember when she had the squares spaced out on the living room floor for weeks. Now, please enjoy Minuet, imagining that your own helpers are on the horizon of bringing you true love. The story is scored to the Velvet Briar Rose Ballroom Dance theme by Eric Baines. Another day has been spun, sighed Emma Schuster, finishing her spinning of cotton for the day. Night and day, Emma spun thread on a spinning wheel in her home, causing calluses on her hands. Her thread made cotton frocks for the women of Bourton-on-the-Water in the Cotswolds in England. Because she was always too busy spinning for someone else, her daughter, Velvet Briar Rose Souster, wore clothes made from the scraps. Most of the time, Velvet even sewed them together herself. I wish I had a pretty dress for the winter Cotswold Ballroom Dance, she sighed. Mother never has time to make one for me. Every year I wear the same old tattered dress that I tried to make new again. When Velvet was 2 years old, her father died of pneumonia in the winter frost. Heartbroken as could be, her mother never remarried, leaving Velvet, now 15, and her mother to fend for themselves alone. However, her aunt, Lilith or Ursula, lived in London, and her uncle Seth was a wealthy banker. So Velvet often spent time on the train visiting her aunt and uncle, hardly making ends meet for herself and her mother. Auntie Lilith, I need a dress for the Cotswold Ballroom Dance, Velvet cried one afternoon in tears. None of the boys ever ask me to dance. Mother doesn't have the money. I can't bear to go to the ball in rags. A dress? Why, that's quite simple, her aunt explained. The fanciest dress that I ever wore was one made by magic silkworms. When I was young, we were very poor, and they spun my wedding dress. Magic silkworms? Velvet questioned. But where do I find them? I've never heard of such creatures. Oh, darling, the silkworms will find you, her auntie insisted, begrudgingly pulling a glass jar out of her desk drawer. But how will they find me? Velvet inquired. If they don't know that I need a dress, they can't find me. Well, now that they've found you, her aunt frowned, handing Velvet the jar. The trick is that the silkworms only make one dress for you in a lifetime, so make sure it is the dress that you really want. A fairy godmother gave them to your grandmother in her youth, and she gave them to me. I protected them all this time without anyone knowing of their powers. They also spun a wedding dress for your mother. So this is why she tries to keep spinning at her wheel." Velvet whispered. "It reminds her of the silkworms." Staring in awe at the worms in the jar, Velvet determined she would have a glorious dress. "I hope I meet my husband at the ball," she quipped. "Then Mother wouldn't have to work so much. Promise me this, that you won't show to your mother the silkworms," her aunt warned, embittered. "You bring the silkworms back to me on your next trip to London. Your uncle wants them for safekeeping." "Yes, Auntie," Velvet promised. "Mother doesn't need to know a thing about the worms." After a good night's rest in London, Velvet's aunt bundled her in a new winter jacket, bought her a morning train ticket, and sent her back to Bourton-on-the-Water with the magic worms in her knapsack. "Good riddance," her aunt murmured. "When I get the silkworms back, I'm never talking to her again." "I have the best aunt," Velvet imagined in innocence on her journey back to the Cotswolds. The entire train ride, she pictured the magical dress that she would wear to the dance. "Mother, I'm home," Velvet called, running into her cottage. "I had a great time with Auntie and Uncle." "Fix yourself a cup of tea," Emma told her daughter. "I'm still working for the day. Lots to do." With only 2 weeks until the winter formal dance, Velvet studied the worms in the jar with anxiety. Then she slipped them in the hole in the floorboards of her bedroom so her mother wouldn't find them. "Now how does this work?" she asked them the next morning. "If I let you out of the jar, do you make me a dress?" The silence from the worms was deafening, and she wondered if her aunt was telling fibs. As the night before the dance approached, she cried herself to sleep, thinking she shouldn't attend the formal. "Who needs a stupid dance?" Velvet cried. "I'm stuck here with my mother and her endless spinning." The morning of the dance, she woke up looking for answers from the magic silkworms one last time. When she moved the floorboard from its position, she peered into an empty jar. The worms were gone. "The worms are missing," Velvet gasped. "Mother must have taken the worms. What will I do now?" As Velvet walked into the cottage kitchen, she found her mother sitting at the spinning wheel, glowing. "The magic silkworms visited us last night," her mother exuded with joy. "They made each of us a glorious dress. My sister told me that the silkworms only made one dress for a woman in a lifetime. She lied." Velvet couldn't bear to tell her mother the truth. The silkworms clearly brought her aunt and uncle their extravagant wealth, allowing her uncle's banking to be established with ease while her mother suffered. "Maybe Auntie slipped them into my knapsack without me knowing," Velvet fibbed, looking at the winter white silk gowns made for both her and her mother. The gowns had elegant touches of red, blue, and green. That evening at the Cotswolds Ballroom Dance, a kind gentleman asked Velvet to dance a minuet. Although she somewhat fumbled through the dance, she took her steps to the rhythm of the music. "Could I come calling next Sunday afternoon?" the young man asked her, holding her hand. "I would like that very much," Velvet agreed, beaming in her silk gown and pinned curls. Meanwhile, Emma circled around the punch bowl until a proper gentleman in a suit asked her to dance. "Would you do me the honor?" the gentleman proposed, ushering her to the dance floor in a moment's notice. Emma blushed and nodded, whisking into a minuet which she hadn't danced in years. The next few weeks were the most exciting of Velvet's life, with a new, full wardrobe spun from silk for her and her mother. As he promised, Velvet's suitor had been courting her, and she looked radiant. In the meantime, Velvet's mother received word that her sister's husband, Seth, had gone to jail for fraudulent business dealings. What's this notice in the post? Emma wondered, studying the letter with the disheartening news. Whatever became of my magic silkworms? Velvet's disheveled aunt demanded, busting into the cottage one afternoon unannounced when Emma was out doing errands at the market. The silkworms? Velvet snapped sharply. Oh, those silly things. I remember now. You told me that they would make me a dress. You're clearly crazy. Mother made all these new dresses by herself. Before Velvet's aunt could grab her by the hand and threaten her, her mother came back from town. So nice to see you, sister, Emma announced, walking through the door with her suitor on her arm. With the handsome man by Emma's side, the evil auntie ran from the cottage without a response. In time, Emma never had calluses on her hands again or her heart, and Velvet got her wish for both of them. Love found its way into their lives. To this day, the magic silkworms will spin a dress for anyone looking for love. This has been Pen Jen's Inkwell Podcast. I wrote and performed all the original stories in the podcast. This podcast is produced by Eric Baines, who scored all the stories and poems in the series to original and public domain music. The podcast is associated with my blog of the same name, Pen Jen's Inkwell, which can be found on my website, jenwaters.com.